The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
What is it, third reading? Third reading, Senate File Number 4942 as amended by conference.
Third reading is amended by conference. Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Sibley, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm thrilled to talk about the Ag Committee. You know, when I came to the state legislature, you get to check, which committees you want to be on. My number one was agriculture because over the years when I watched committees on TV, I thought that this committee was the best one to be on because everybody seemed to work together. And in Minnesota agriculture, we are the powerhouse, and from my perspective, is that when bills are introduced is that they have got to be agriculture friendly. Legislation must be kind to those of us that are in agriculture. And the bills that we pass, those of us that are in agriculture, we must all have the opportunity to benefit from any legislation passed within this session. And most of the farmers in my district are be considered conventional farmers, small farmers. There are some organic and some other ones as well. But the one troubling thing that I observed this year was sometimes the divisiveness that was in the committee. And I'm not necessarily talking about my fellow committee members from either side. And I want to mention something that a testifier said in committee that has bothered me since the day that this person said it. And here's what the testifier said. The track record of state agencies to get equal resources to BIPOC farmers versus mainstream European descended farmers. So the baby booming generation is just not good. And that comment sort of hit to home. One of the reasons why my number one constituent in my district is of that generation. The hard work that he does, to hear that come out from somebody's mouth who doesn't have a row to hoe, and if she did, she doesn't know how to hoe it. I mean, it was quite troubling. And a lot of my area farmers that I'm very close to come from that same generation. And it's just unfortunate that a comment like that to condemn entire generation is just not warranted. And I think everybody in agriculture have had struggles, and that would include my family as well. My family came to America in the late 1770s. They didn't have a Chevy Silverado to get them from New York to Minnesota. And I think that we all struggle, no matter the size of the farm, and we just try to produce crops that benefit everyone. And so I just want to go over a couple of struggles that maybe our younger generations really need to get a better grasp on what is involved in agriculture. And I really wish it was, a bed of flowers, but sometimes it's not. So here's a couple of stories. My grandfather was probably one of the largest, this is my opinion, turkey farmers in southern Minnesota. And it was always kind of fun to go visit my grandparents on the farm, except turkeys are not very friendly, and they used to chase us. So when we used to come to visit, we'd run from the car to the house because the turkeys might get us. But he had struggles too, and one of them that he had on the farm is that he had a fire that burned down his barns, and only one little chicken remained. So there were definitely some struggles there. And of course, previously I've mentioned about my own family with the hail. But even this last year, farmers did struggle within my area because not only were some of the farms hit by hail once, but they were hit by hail twice. And sure, you can say, we have insurance, that'll cover your loss, but that just isn't so. Depends upon what kind of coverage you get. It just doesn't cover everything. And I guess we just need to do a better job of educating our younger generations that we all struggle in different ways. Sometimes it's hard to get land access. People either don't want to rent, or sometimes you would do things to a property that you rent and it doesn't turn out the way that you want. Here would be an example. I know of a farmer who rented property for years, took care of it, tiled it, improved it, and the landowner put the property up for sale and never told the renter. And the renter found out by the listing agent. So you can see the frustration that farmer had, losing potentially thousands of dollars because he put inputs into the land to prepare it for the next year. So everybody, we do struggle, and it just comes in different forms. And so I mentioned that comment because, like I said, it's just unfortunate. We should all be working together. Whether you have a garden or whatever it is, 200 acres, 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres, we all struggle. And so we should all be working together for our farmers, because there is a lot of uncertainty within agriculture. And I know that we put forth a lot of bills that try to help our farmers, dairy farmers, whatever the case might be. But agriculture is very important to Minnesota. I think last year I asked the question, did you eat today? And if you did, we really should remember where that comes from. And it's always good for people who want to know where their food came from. I mean, I think that's very important. And so I am thankful that during the conference committee that the AFRAC situation, that the fee isn't going to be diverted. So I thank you for that. That's important. And I just hope that going forward that we continue to work together for legislation for the betterment of all agriculture and for Minnesota. So thank you for your time.
I recognize the member from Martin, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. You know, I've had the Agriculture Committee on my list of favored committee assignments the last 2 terms that I've been here, and the answer is always, sorry, Bjorn, you're the youngest, least farmer of them all, so we don't have enough seats for you. To give you kind of an example why I'm the least farmer, I haven't been doing it for 100 years like some of the other members on this side of the aisle. I graduated from high school in 2009. My grandpa, so I've got farming on both sides of the family. My dad farms. My grandpa has farmland on my mom's side. And my grandpa on my mom's side told me, he said, Bjorn, you will not be farming until you get a college education, because he saw life through the 1980s with the farm crisis. He says you have to have the ability to go to town and get a job. So he said, Bjorn, you're not farming an acre of my land until you graduate from college. So I graduated from college in 2013, went and did some Army training in the summer of 2014. So my first year farming was in 2015. So that means that this is my 9th season. Right? This is my 9th season farming. And when I look at this whole interpretation of beginning farmer, emerging farmer, I get really kind of sad about it. Because according to the federal government, a beginning farmer is a farmer within their first 10 years. Well, members, I am only now in a financial position where I could take advantage of those benefits. And guess what? There's no land around for me to buy. And the reason why there is no land around for me to buy is a couple different reasons. Now, we've got the state of Minnesota here subsidizing these solar farms that are going to be taking farmland off the books. But not only is it taking farmland off the books, it's raising the price of land for everyone else. It's a supply and demand kind of thing, members. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. If you own the land and you want to do it, that's yours. That's capitalism, right? That's your own individual landowner rights. But when the government is assisting in doing something, they're choosing a winner. They're also choosing losers. And in this instance, I'm one of those people. When we've got the government accumulating land in multiple different avenues, right? They're increasing the value of farmland for solar that they're subsidizing, or in some instances, like what happened just about a half a mile down the road from my family farm, the land actually went to another organization. And the organization then turned it into a conservation area, and that's fine with them. But the individual looked at me as Representative Olson and said, Representative Olson, we bought this land for $10,000 an acre, and we could have gone higher. That's what they told me. And I'm looking here, I'm this beginning farmer and thinking to myself, there is no way I could go to the bank and anyone would ever trust this beginning farmer with $10,000 an acre land. I'd just been priced out. And the DNR is managing that land. Not only is the DNR managing that land, but now it's off the tax books as well. Members, this is something we need to be concerned about. Now, I'm not telling you that everything's going to be bad tomorrow, right? I'm not telling you that this is something that needs to be addressed immediately, but this is something that I'm dealing with. The only land that's been available in the last 15 years in my area is now off the tax books. And I didn't have an opportunity to bid on it. And I would have really appreciated that opportunity because I currently don't own any farmland. I farm other people's land. It's my family's land, but I farm that land, and I would like to add to what my ancestors have been able to accumulate through some very hard work and some luck, frankly. Some luck in the fact that my grandfather made it through the farm crisis. He lost his farm and had to buy it back, and that's what he did. So I would like to have that opportunity. And so I have some issues with us here in the state of Minnesota using other people's taxpayer dollars to fight against other taxpayers. It's something that we need to keep in mind. We maybe don't have to just look at it and strike everything from the books and saying we're attacking our farmers right and left here, but it's something I would like everyone to just keep an eye on and say we need to ensure that we're not manipulating the market here and pricing other people out of this situation for things, picking winners and picking losers. Now, I wanted to also discuss the fact that some of the things in this bill, especially the expansion or the extension of the Agricultural Fertilizer Research and Educational Council. Now, that's AFREC for those of you who don't know, and it's this tax on fertilizer that goes towards research. Now, members, I'm going to tell you a story from a couple weeks ago because I dislike taxes. I don't care where they're coming from. I dislike them, but I understand that if they're being responsibly utilized, then I can accept it. I'll dislike it, but I can accept it. Now, I went in here and I was looking at this tax. I'm like, what is this tax doing for the state of Minnesota? What is this tax doing for the farmers? Because the farmers are paying it. How is this benefiting the farmers? And I asked some really hard questions. And when a farmer starts asking really hard questions about things that farmers are paying, those groups come to you like you wouldn't believe. I had people stopping me in the hall like, Representative Olson, I see you got a question with this, with these checkoff dollars. I see you got a question with this AFRAC tax. Can we talk about it? And we had some really good conversations, and I grilled them for a really good time. You can talk to Lee about it. I grilled him really hard for the first 15 minutes. And at the end of it, I was like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll support the extension of AFRAC after it. Because he had stood there and he told me how the money was being utilized to the benefit of those that it is being taken from. Members, I, generally speaking, dislike taxes in almost every case. But when it is being responsibly utilized, then I can accept it. Minnesota has a lot of taxes. And I am not convinced that we are responsibly utilizing all those tax dollars. But in this case, I can accept it. And I think that it's a good thing that we are extending this for the next 5 years. But members, I want to leave you with kind of a little story of where I think agriculture is going. Now, my grandfather, he just actually passed away about 10 days ago. My grandfather is almost 96. His birthday is June 13th, so he was almost 96. And his first memory of farming was on a horse. So we got this man, his first memories on a horse. Members, the last time he was in a tractor, I was with him and he was utilizing the GPS. So imagine in one individual's lifetime, you're on a horse doing the work. And I think he was 6 to 8 years old. So 88 to 90 years later, my grandpa's utilizing the GPS technology. Now that's a really impressive thing, but it's also concerning to me because we are not a huge farming operation. I had to work in town. I was a school teacher who farmed after school and on the weekends because a family farm barely makes enough money to cover the family it's trying to take care of. And then when you're the extension, like the adult son, then you have to work in town and then you work for your dad and then you kind of work this way and you don't make enough to be only a farmer. I still don't make enough money to be only a farmer. If you look at my taxes, they don't call me if you make more than 50% of your income, then you're actually federally a farmer. A little less than half of my income is from farming when you take all the other things I do. So this is how it works. The fear that I have is as a smaller family farm, what will it look like when I'm 96? Oh, Lord willing, I get there. If I keep in this job, I might not make it. But members, when I'm 96, what will agriculture look like? We need to be concerned about this. Because my family farm does not use $600,000 tractors. We don't use $270,000 planters that can go 9 miles an hour. I planted my field last year with a 1983 John Deere 4850, no GPS, no steering. I did it with a 20-foot seed drill. That thing's older than I am. So the tractor I was using is older than me. But we got the work done, and we made it through, and we put food on the table for our families. What is agriculture going to look like when I'm 96? When my kids, will they still have the opportunity to run a family farm? Will that be possible? Or will we all be required to have these $1 million automated tractors, drones, and all this really crazy cool stuff that you see with technology? That really that worries me. Because I'm doing the math and I can't even see why or how someone can afford a $250,000 piece of equipment, let alone $1 million autonomous tractor. So members, I would just advocate that as we move forward in this, we keep in mind that the family farm, the backbone of the history of the United States, that's what we need to keep centralized. 20,000 acre farms are huge. They're not the norm. The majority of farmers are small family farms, and let's keep it that way. It doesn't mean you give them money, but it also doesn't mean that you fight against them. And in some ways, the state of Minnesota is fighting against the family farm. So members, as I close this out here this evening, I just ask that you keep that in mind. I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 3-footers and a 2-footer. So for those of you who are using the metric system, that's a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 13-month-old. When they're old enough to farm someday or have that opportunity, I hope they have it. And I think that the state of Minnesota can do a lot to ensure that those 3 kids and all the other kids who want to farm someday have the opportunity. Thank you for letting me kind of go off a little bit and include my standard English measurement of students and kids. I appreciate the opportunity to talk on this. Agriculture is a big deal to the state of Minnesota, and I hope that we can all agree that this is something that is worth fighting for and ensuring that the family farm sticks around for at least until I'm 96, right? At least until I'm 96. Thank you so much.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, members, and Madam Speaker. What is not in this amendment, members? I have a bill that requires labeling on lab-grown meats and the labeling of products made with insects. And when the agriculture bill came to the floor, I simply added, for now, I was requesting an amendment on just labeling. I totally gutted my bill and just offered a simple provision on labeling items made with bugs. And because I believe that people have a right to know what they are purchasing, and it needs to be clearly defined. So when a person is purchasing pasta or a flour, whatever it is, that they know that they are getting flour and not flour made with crickets or some other insect. And that amendment did not pass, which was kind of sad, because in that bill, that same bill that I had offered the amendment for labeling on insects, we had a provision in the egg bill on labeling honey, because we want to make sure that we are getting real honey and not fake honey, okay? So I support that. I'm not complaining about that. I, too, if I am purchasing honey, want to make sure I have 100% honey. That's why I shop local from my local beekeepers, because I know that I'm getting the real deal. But aside from that, members, food is going to be one of the issues that's coming in the future, that we are going to be having conversations, I am sure, in regards to that. So there was, a while ago, there was a headline that said, that eating bugs was like a right-wing conspiracy or something like that. And I kind of thought that was funny. Oh, here it is, NPR, March 31st, 2023. How a conspiracy theory about eating bugs made its way. And I kind of laugh about that, because just recently in the Star Tribune, April 17th, there was a headline, "Why We Should Eat Bugs." Okay, but in 2023, in the NPR article, it said it was a conspiracy theory. But here we are, April 17th, Star Tribune. Why we should eat the bugs. And do you know why the Star Tribune believes that we should eat the bugs? Well, the Star Tribune believes that bugs are good for you. You should eat them. They are healthy for you. They are delicious. They are amazing. And they have really high protein. But it's also good for the planet. And why is it almost good, or why is it good for the planet? Well, because according to the Star Tribune, the answer they give us, when you raise cattle, you get a lot more greenhouse gases and ammonia compared to when you raise insects. Insects are also very efficient in converting feed into food. They need a lot less space. You can raise insects vertically, so you need less space. They're efficient. They're high protein. It seems like a win-win-win. Members, sometime in the future, in the next few years, I know that this body is going to be discussing ways to reduce our consumption on animal products. And that's a concern for me. That is a huge concern for me. Our friend, not our friend, but maybe he's your friend, not my friend, Bill Gates, who is a college dropout from Harvard, but somehow he's like a super expert on vaccines and on the climate, and we are supposed to trust him. But at the COP28, he said the issue of food systems and how with climate change, a lot of farmers aren't able to grow their crops, which is a tragedy for them. And we'll talk about using innovation to solve that problem. And quite honestly, he is a big fan of moving us into lab-grown meat products and eating the bugs. And the other reason is because we are going to have billions of people on the earth, and how are we going to feed them? So I want you to think about that type of reasoning here as you see more and more articles coming out about why we should be eating food grown in laboratories, and I put food in quotations, and why we should be eating bugs. The World Economic Forum, which are elitists, are globalists, that go to their annual conference, by 2030, their goal is you will eat less meat as an occasional treat, not as a staple. So I think I have talked enough about eating bugs, but it is something to be aware of. Oh, and by the way, the University of Minnesota recently also came out with an article about how wonderful it would be for us to eat bugs. So it also is locally, that idea is brewing. The RDA, I'm concerned about that provision with the $50 million of ratepayers' dollars extending the solar production incentive. Members, this is the taxpayers' dollars. This is individuals that have Excel and they pay into this fund, not because they want to, it's because they have to for green energy. And it's like a slush fund. Now, I'm very concerned about that. I have human rights concerns. We should all know where I stand on human rights issues. That solar industry is filled with slave labor, child labor. There is no work standards, okay? And that is why, truly, as we have heard today, why we must do mining here in Minnesota, because at least we would know what those work standards are. You guys just passed a standard for Uber and Lyft drivers, okay? But there are no work standards for the children and slavery. Talk about work standards. They're forced into it so that we can have the solar panels and the green energy products here in the land of the free. Does that make sense, anybody? I don't think that makes sense, and it's cruel, it's inhumane, and I am so tired of hearing, President Biden is working on this issue. We know it's an issue, we're working on it. It's years later, and we are still relying on this system, and it's like I said, it is inhumane, and it bothers me when schools want to put solar panels on their rooftops. So you've got children here in America, here in Minnesota, in our communities, going to school with solar panels on their rooftops. Meanwhile, those children who are digging in the mines with no work standards are not getting an education. No schooling for them, because they're too busy digging the minerals to make sure that our students can have solar on their rooftops so that they can get an education. It is mind-boggling to me, mind-boggling, and we should all be ashamed. I know we are ashamed. I can't imagine or impugn your motives or even begin to think, but I would hope you are ashamed of that as well. But unfortunately, again, it is another year where we are not addressing this issue. By the way, we are taking prime farmland. We heard that from Representative Olson. Prime farmland. And I start to wonder, maybe, just maybe, that is part of the plan. Let's take agriculture production out, throw in some solar panels on that land, and then maybe they're not going to want the solar panels in 25 years or when their contract is done, but how is that land going to be able to be made available to farm again? Is it going to be able to be farmed again? I don't know. It is very possible that they will only take the cement and stuff out for like 6 feet into the ground and leave the rest of it in the ground. And the remediation of that land will not be able, we won't be able to farm on that land again. Maybe it'll be continually have to be used for solar panels. And then when there's no farmland, where are we going to get our food? Oh, I guess we're just going to eat the lab-grown food and eat the bugs. I don't think so. And it's cicada season. I've seen a lot of articles lately about, ooh, cicadas, here's how you can cook them. They're really good for you. You can do this and do that, and they're just delicious. I'm not going to. You know why? Because I love me some prime rib, and they can take that from my cold, dead hands. Let's see here. So we have 250,000 for ultra-efficient vehicle grants for the development of vehicles that achieve at least 75 per gallons while operating on gasoline, or the equivalent of 75 miles per gallon. That is interesting, Senate language. I'm not even sure. I mean, I've never even heard of this, 75 per miles gallon. That's fascinating to me. And a 1.2 million general fund to the Department of Commerce to facilitate timely actions and non-environmental review routing and site proceedings. The base for this appropriation is $2.4 million each year in the tails. That wasn't even included in either the House version or the Senate version of the bill, so we never properly vetted that in either committee. No committee did it go through. I actually missed serving on the Energy Committee. I did it for 2 years. I got myself off of Health and Human Services, and I was super excited that I had done my time, right? And then I got on Energy, super loved it, but unfortunately it was over Zoom, and it was terribly run. But what was hilarious about that is we'd have all these bills that go through, and they ran it like an infomercial. So you'd have all the propaganda people pushing their ideas, and then you'd have like 2 minutes to discuss stuff. But I would have really loved to have been on this committee this year, where maybe there would have been more time to discuss because we were in person. So I appreciate the members on both sides of the aisle that do serve on this committee, because it is important work. Although I prefer my energy bills and my constituents' energy bills to be lower and reliable. And we know that this last 2 legislative sessions, we have made the grid unreliable. We are going to have blackouts. That is just a reality. And who are they going to blame? Certainly not my side of the aisle. Well, let's see here. Oh, I really love this stuff. We have $1.7 million to subsidize free software that automates review of applications and issuance of permits for residential solar projects. So we have this program. It's a free software, and we're saying we're just going to give you some money. We're going to give you $1.7 million from ratepayers. I guess it's a gift, I don't know. It's free, but we're gonna pay for it anyway. That's just wasteful spending. These are hardworking taxpayers that are trying to pay their already expensive electricity bills. And, goodness. Oh, we have a new program that's created to provide technical assistance and issue financial awards to subsidize, again, another free software to local governments that install automated software for review and issuance of permits for residential solar energy projects. Why? Why are we wasting ratepayer dollars on items that are free? That, to me, is really, really awful. There's no repealing of the right of first refusal in this bill. And the Minnesota Propane Association, many of my constituents rely on propane. We love our clean propane, okay? Well, guess what? Minnesota Propane opposes many of the fuel switching provisions and states that this bill removes guardrails established in 21 and 2023 that allows emissions to continue and potentially increase. Members, we passed this in 2021 and last year. So I'm wondering what changed between today and 2023 and 2021? I don't quite understand it. Usually we try to get some peace in the valley on problematic language so that we don't have opposition to bills. But I guess that is not what we do anymore. Members, I want to, again, thank you for the work that you do. Energy is very important, and we need to make sure that we are keeping energy low, reliable, efficient, and affordable. And so I still don't feel like we have even came close to even moving the needle on that issue. And with that, Madam Speaker, thank you. I'm going to, just in case you did not know, I personally will be voting no on this bill, and I encourage each and every one of my colleagues to do the same. Let's stand in solidarity. Let's not pass this conference committee report, and let's start over. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker and members, thank you very much. Just briefly, just a couple of thoughts on energy. I'd like to share with the body. The first is that I want to thank Representative Acomb for her service as the chair of the Energy Committee. The Energy Committee is one of these areas where it's super important, but the subject matter is exceptionally complex. And so if I would just ask members of both sides of the aisle that as you serve in the legislature and you serve in the Energy Committee, make sure to study the facts, get into the nuts and bolts of this stuff. Every day you can't help but learn something new about it, so please do that. Just some thoughts about this. I'll be voting no on the adoption of this report, but I just want to highlight some concerns I have for the future for members. One is that with the exceptional amount of resources coming from the federal government through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, there is going to be technological breakthroughs in energy that we have not expected. I don't know what those are. If I knew what those things were, I'd be investing in them right now, or I'd be applying for a job with those companies. But the reality is that when you look at these, whether it's small modular reactors of nuclear, perhaps an energy breakthrough in storage area, in northeastern Minnesota, the very promising opportunity for perhaps geological hydrogen, naturally forming hydrogen, that could take place, we just don't know. But I would ask you that we all learn from the mistakes of the past, and that is that when we go all in on something and technology advances past our decision making at that point, it can make us look real bad. We do not want Minnesotans to be investing tens of billions of dollars in Betamax when streaming is coming around the corner. And I can't help but think that in the area of energy, while we specifically can't identify those technologies, that we're about to see some transformational breakthroughs. I think about, Madam Speaker, when you and I first got elected, the nation's back was against the wall. All our energy we were getting was in environmentally sensitive areas, or perhaps it was in jurisdictions by people who did not like us. And we would pay them money, and they would use our money to buy bullets to shoot at our young men and women. And then, roundabout a couple years later, a man named George Mitchell came up with horizontal drilling and fracking, and now America is the world's largest energy producer. And that transformational breakthrough has allowed us to save money, reduce pollution, and have more independent energy. So as we go forward, and again, I'll be voting no on this bill today, I would just ask members of both sides of the aisle, regardless of your role, majority or minority, to keep that in mind. When you're working with energy policy, it's super important, okay? And you got to get it right. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I appreciate you listening to my words.
The member from Roseau, Representative Burkle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to speak once again and reasons for my opposition for passage of this conference committee report. You know, Representative Frentz talked a little bit about eating bugs, and food safety is a big issue, but I want to reframe that a little bit. You know, in our industry, animal feed's a big deal, and as long as we know what we're eating, right? As long as it's labeled properly, there's people that want to eat bugs, and that's fine.
Madam Speaker.
But yes.
The member from Chisago.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move a call of the House.
Representative New Brindley requests a call of the House. Are there 10 hands? Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll. Will the chief clerk call the name of the member who is participating remotely?
Carol.
Carol present.
Carol present.
Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
Representative Long moves that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The clerk will close the roll and the Sergeant-at-Arms will bring in the absent members. Members, we are on debate of Senate File 4942. I joined this programming when it was already in progress. I see there are a couple people who are on the list for the second time. I won't go to the folks who are on the list for the second time until everyone has spoken a first time. I believe that's Rule 2.32. The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe we are still discussing the Supplemental Commerce, Ag, and Energy Bill. Is that correct, Madam Speaker? I want to make sure I'm on the right order of business after this interruption and a bit of confusion. It's quite fitting that the Commerce, Ag, and Energy bills are tied together. You would think maybe
Members, please be quiet in the chamber so we can hear Representative Torkelson. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you. I know they're hanging on my every word, Madam Speaker. Commerce, Ag, and Energy should be tied together. Greater Minnesota, where agriculture is the heartbeat of our countryside, in fact, the heartbeat of our state, doesn't act in a vacuum. As I chaired the Transportation Committee, I fully realized how important it was that our transportation system, including our roads, bridges, railroads, both first-class railroads and short-line railroads, actually can do the work that gets the commodities we raise to the world market and also brings in the products that we need to raise those crops. And of course, energy, we need energy to operate our farms. I think we're quite some distance from a battery-powered combine, but this energy is critical to our crop production and to our cost of production. So we need the energy, we need the products that we get, and we need to transport our products off the farm into the markets where they are sold and bring money back into this state so that you have somebody to tax. At the same time, we have been faced, this session especially, with aggression towards production agriculture. We've seen efforts from the Ag Committee to ignore bigger farms, to focus on small farms, which is fine. We need all farms, both large, medium, and small. But there's been an effort to demonize large farmers just because of their size. It's kind of like demonizing Walmart or Target. Think of how retail industry has changed in this country over the last number of decades. I can remember when my family went to the country store where everything was on the shelf, but there was a person who actually took it off the shelf for you and set it on the counter, and then you put up your, tallied up your bill, and in fact, you didn't even pay your bill. They kept a charge account at the local store, and at the end of the month, then you'd settle up. Kind of like you do with your credit card today. You charge and charge and charge and settle up at the end of the month if you have enough money to pay the bill. But those sorts of retail have disappeared, just as, for the most part, the sort of agriculture that was done in those days has also disappeared. My father started farming with horses back in the day, but those horses no longer do much farming. They're all running around the racetrack. Perhaps we'll get to talk about racetracks later. So rural Minnesota has changed dramatically, but it's still so very important to the success of this state. And for us to demonize agriculture, I think, is a huge mistake. Farmers aren't perfect. City dwellers aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. But we do the best we can with the tools we have available to do the work we need to do. There's been a lot of criticism of drainage from the environmental community. Drainage is critical to successful farming. You know, if you imagine a farm field and you're going to apply fertilizer to that farm field to raise a crop. If that field is poorly drained, those areas in the field that are too wet won't raise a crop. But yet you've put the fertilizer there, and that fertilizer then is subject to running off or running in through the groundwater. Again, that's where a lot of our nitrate issues come, when the crop can't utilize the fertilizer that's there. But when the field is well drained, it's kind of like your flower pot. I'm sure many of you have grown flowers in a pot. First thing you do is make sure you have a pot with some holes in the bottom, and then you put some shards of pottery or a few rocks in the bottom, and then your soil on top of that. And that's what makes for a good environment for that plant. You don't want those roots to be standing, soaking in wet water. You want the pot to be well drained. Well, the field tile does the same thing. So when you have a field where the field is well drained, you've applied the fertilizer. When you plant the crop, then the crop grows through the entire field, uses the fertilizer that you've put in the root zone, and that fertilizer then ends up in the crop instead of in the groundwater. So it's a double benefit. These production methods have been developed over time, and the technology that we use to install them and utilize them has improved dramatically over time. I've seen many pictures of the good old days when farmers actually dug in tile lines by hand. They'd go out in the wintertime with their tile spades, dig in trenches by hand with hand shovels as deep as 10, 15 feet deep. They would cover those areas with straw overnight so that it wouldn't freeze, and they'd throw the straw back off the next day and dig some more. I don't know any of us in here that would be willing to work that hard to just drain a field, to get rid of the excess water so that they could grow a crop. Those fields have been conditioned and prepared over the years to be productive. It's all about production, and Minnesota farmers are among the most productive farmers in the entire world. That's no easy feat. It comes with hard work, significant investment of capital. As you know, as Bjorn was talking about earlier about the price of equipment, on my farm, we actually share equipment to make it more affordable. A couple neighbors and I share the equipment because the combine these days, if you're going to buy a new one, is about $1 million. That's a lot of change. But those machines are very, very efficient, and they can do the work of many. There's a kickback on that, though, because it doesn't take as many people to run a farm as it did back in the good old days. So our rural communities do suffer as a result of that. We don't have the population out there that we used to have. In the meantime, population in the metropolitan area is growing, and that's why we have this divide, it seems, across the state. You've seen a dramatic change in the political landscape of Minnesota because agriculture has changed, rural Minnesota has changed, and we've attracted population density to the metropolitan area, which then comes along with it political power. You know, I really think it'd be a good idea if we went to kind of like the U.S. Senate and had a representative from each county, and then land would be better represented. But we have this little problem called the U.S. Constitution that requires one man, one vote, and so we can't do that. We have to have political districts based on population, and then we get to do that redistricting thing every 10 years. So, Madam Speaker and members, agriculture deserves to be treated well, but to be treated well, we need the city folks to understand how important agriculture is, because we don't have the political power to maintain the attention and the investment that we need to keep our rural communities thriving. We've seen this year a lot of action that was going to make it harder for us to maintain our lands in the form of this new public waters inventory that Representative Hansen has forced into the Environment Bill. That's fine. We need to protect our waters, but we need to do it in a cooperative way, working together and finding the solutions that we need to do the work we need to do in a way that we can afford. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, speaking of agriculture, for those of you who didn't know, I'm a farmer. My husband and I raise wheat, sugar beets, and soybeans, and I guess a little corn this year. So we, when Representative Torkelson talked about farms, my farms are bigger in some areas, or in the area that I live in, but it's a normal size. There isn't, in rural Minnesota, when you are around the different areas, a section of land is usually a mile square. And when I grew up, there was somebody on every square, at least every corner. But now it's unusual if you see a house even on every square of land. A lot of agriculture happens in my world. If you've ever came up to the District 1B, what you will notice, unlike southwestern Minnesota or southeastern Minnesota or even central Minnesota, what you will notice is it's flat, super flat. The elevation doesn't go, it runs to the Red River, but it takes a long time to move unless you've got the flood in the spring, and you've all heard me carrying bills that are for the Red River basin. So we hold some of that water back now. We have places to hold water back, and then we can let it go later as the water dissipates. But it still is needing to be protected because the communities where the water flows is really, it just sits for a long time. I have a little town in northern Minnesota called Oslo. Actually, Representative Burkle and I, it's right on the edge of our two districts, and they literally become an island every time there's water. This year it was very minimal, and so they were good to go, but literally they have a couple of teachers that do schooling right in Oslo, because otherwise they go to East Grand Forks or Warren, and those teachers teach right there in the community because the students, they can't get out. They use airboats to get in and out, and it usually lasts about 3-4 weeks. So that's why they adapt by having some teachers willing to teach the students there so that they can be home. And then the other thing is, then they're sandbagging, helping to save, protect whatever is happening in Oslo at the time. And Oslo actually is a very small town, but it has 3 or 4 businesses. I want to think it's at least 4 businesses: a grocery store, a car dealership, a very popular one. I'm trying to think, a restaurant, and yeah, at a bar, of course, the restaurant and the bar, and the wheat elevator that is really large. So while people would look at a small town and say, why are you protecting it? There's a lot of investment in that area. And of course, people are reliant on, we talk about food deserts. So anyway, when we talk about the large farms in, the average farms, let's put it that way, in northern Minnesota, they run anywhere from 2 to 5,000 acres. There's a couple of guys that farm across the road from me that actually have more like 10,000 acres, so they have a larger crew. But like Representative Torkelson said, it is hard to hire people, and with your larger machines now, you can do so much more. We can plant a 200-300 acre field. Well, it isn't in it's usually 150 acres, but you can plant 300 acres in a day easily with the planters that put down seeds. So it makes us much more efficient. And we've been really fortunate to find people that are semi-retired that like to play farmer for a while, so they come out and get in my tractors and drive them. And something that I wanted to share with you, I know a lot of people are worried about water and contamination, but in our farm, and many of my neighbors, most every farm does this, tractors now have GPS but it doesn't just drive it. It also collects all the information. How much seed you put down, if you did any other applications in the field, how much fuel you're using. It helps us to manage that, but it also gives us the health of the field, the soil that is in the ground. So we're constantly watching how that's doing and how successful we are at growing a crop. And all those things help us, just like a lot of other intelligence that are in other worlds. We really appreciate the technology that our military provides. We are often the beneficiaries of that technology. I would say that my 21-year-old grandson, which I'm assuming will farm with us, he's just getting married now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't sit in his pickup and manage the tractors going up and down the field, working the ground. We'll see if that happens, and who knows, I might not be there then. Anyway, farming is highly technical anymore, and I would share this also. My brothers raise hogs. That all is very technical too, and we don't. It's not like when I grew up and we had cattle and pigs and they were in the barns and we let them outside, and I had to go water the pigs in the summertime because pigs don't sweat, so they have to be cooled off. And so we would take the hose and wash them off, and of course they'd hang in the mud, and they'd get to eat when the corn was ripe, they'd get to eat some of the corn shell and all of that. We'd husk the corn out by the hogs, and then they would enjoy that part of corn. So, but anymore, my brothers you can't even walk in a hog barn for them. They have boots and garb they have to put on and wash down and keep all of that managed. They have to have a exact temperature in the barn, so they're constantly managing fans. So when we talk about energy and climate, the needs for animals, it is super, super important that we have power consistent all the time. They have a very large generator. If the power goes out, say it's winter storm, or we just have low energy, they have to have that to consistently keep the fans going. Hogs do produce some heat, so they don't need a whole lot of heat, but it's really important. So all of this, in this bill, all of this works well to, so we have to be careful to protect agriculture and make sure that it can work together to be efficient. And just remember, agriculture is one of our #1 products. We're, I believe, #1 in turkeys, #1 in sugar beets. I believe hogs are highly high level up there. And pork is good. Don't overcook it when you have pork. But pork is a really good meat. But we're really successful, and what I wanted to point out was agriculture provides us with an economic value that keeps us consistent, unlike some of the other things we have to worry about. Agriculture keeps rural Minnesota a little more balanced, which is really important as we function in rural Minnesota. So if you have time, you're headed up north, give one of us a call. We'd be happy to give you a tour, show you what's happening in our world, and I really appreciate it when somebody comes out. I really appreciated when I went to the mining area. Representative Hackbarth gave us a tour, set up a tour out there, and it was really educational. Did you ask me something? Oh, Dan, you have to go all the way to Roseau to find Dan Fabian. He's either fishing or mayoring, I believe. Or watching. He might be. Hey, Dan, if you're out there, good evening. Anyway, thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Otter Tail, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too have some concerns about agriculture and energy and some of the the goals that we're putting on especially our ag producers. I want to talk a little bit about ag land. I was at a function in December, and my business is I work with ag producers. And I was listening to an economist talk about some of our ag land in the world. And he drew a comparison of where we are in the United States because of the wealth that we have in ag land in comparison to the world's ag land. And he said the rest of the world will struggle to produce the levels that we need because they're so dependent on fertility. Where in the United States, especially in the breadbasket of the United States, we have a unique level of high quality ag land. I want to give you a little bit about my background. I grew up on a family farm. We milked 70 cows. We ran about 900 acres. I'm one of 8 kids. There's 7 boys in my family, and we just kept having boys, and we have one sister, and she runs the place. But the 7 boys, we just kept having more and more work over time. My dad started. He still farms today. He's 87. He still plants. This is the first year he hasn't planted his corn. And so I have an older brother. I'm 62, he's 63. And for the first time, he said, "Tim, why don't you plant the corn this year?" And he said he didn't even hesitate. He said, "I thought I'd never come the day when I would get to plant the corn." So when he graduated from high school, my grandfather wasn't really into this, getting to be a lot more progressive in farming. So my dad, when he was 18 years old, still farmed with horses. And so that gives you an idea how far things have come in a lifetime. But overall, that family farm is such an important part of our economy. And so over my whole working experience, when I graduated from college, I ended up working for Monsanto. And Monsanto is a large company that helps farmers get rid of their weeds. And so when I graduated from college, I did that for 8 years. And then after that, I said, you know what? Because I grew up on a farm, I was really interested in doing my own thing. And so I wanted to go off and branch off. And so I grew up on a dairy farm, and a friend of mine was doing work with a company working with dairy farms. So we picked up our family. I had a 1-year-old, and I had a new company car every year. My dad said, "What are you thinking, leaving your great job with Monsanto?" I played golf a lot. And I moved about 150 miles north. I didn't know a soul in that area, and I started calling on dairy farms. And for 26 years, we called on dairy farms. So the dairy industry is an industry I completely understand. But when it comes to the base of our economy, ag production is so important. And I don't know if people in this room know this, but all wealth comes from the ground. And then we spin it after that. And that's how we all get our wealth. But we are basically shuffling paper in comparison to what ag producers do for us. Ag production is very important for our economy. So I sold that business in 2018. My youngest was a junior in high school, and the great thing about having a small business is your family's all very active with you in the business. And so I had one of my competitors called me one day. He said, "What's your long-term plan?" And I said, I thought I should get one. And my junior in high school said, "Dad, I know what you're going to do." Because he said, "You can't do this by yourself." And so we were calling on about 300 dairy farms, everything that they use up on a farm. And we got to know a lot about their families and their businesses and their struggles over that course of time. So one of the product lines that I had at the time, I maintain, and that's the business I run today, and we specialize in soil health. So we sell products that help get more conversion out of fertility, whether it comes from manure or whether it comes from commercial fertilizers. The goal of what we do is to increase conversion. There's a lot of products over the 13 years that I've worked in this line that help do this. Some are biological products. Our product is not. Our product is a product that works off of minerals. Minerals are a really important part.
Members, if we could have it a little bit more quiet in the chamber so we can hear Representative Murphy. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Appreciate it. But what we've done in this technology is there's certain core minerals that are very important for conversion. Cobalt is a mineral that is important for conversion it helps the life of the bacteria. We can measure it. There's tests that you can measure it with, the Haney test, the PFLA test, and they help show you what levels of increased bacterial life are in the soil. So cobalt is the most important mineral. The reason I came across that is for 50 years, this technology has been used in cattle to increase the microbial activity of an animal's rumen. So the other important minerals that we have too are minerals that increase conversion of nitrogen. Iron is the mineral that converts nitrogen. And so when we're looking at trying to be better at fertilizer and what we do, and especially what we do with nitrogen, it's really important that we look at this. So I had a really interesting conversation about 10 years ago with one of our chief chemists. And he ended up giving a presentation on this because I was so interested in it. But he showed the 7 essential minerals in the world, and these are really the minerals that are responsible for life. And if we erode any of those minerals, like iron, like cobalt, like zinc, you know, those are important minerals. John? Okay. But anyway, I want to thank you for listening to my story. I'm really sold on agriculture, really sold on making sure we don't make it hard for agriculture with our energy too. And so I think it's really important that we take a closer look at production ag. And so I want to say no to this bill. So thank you, appreciate it.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Vang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought we had a couple more speeches to go, but I would love to finally talk. Representative Schultz, thank you for your comments earlier on how much I've learned about agriculture in Greater Minnesota. It reminded me to reflect about and how I'm ending my first biennium as Ag Chair. Yes, you can say I learned a lot, but 90% of the time I go to Greater Minnesota is because I respect rural communities. I respect Greater Minnesota. I value the input of Greater Minnesota. And I go to Greater Minnesota because I know they probably have never met a farmer that looks like me. And I'm sure Greater Minnesota doesn't know how much of an impact emerging farmers, and in particular Hmong farmers here in the Twin Cities, have transformed the farmers market and the local food economy for the past 40 years. And so just to keep it brief, as we end session, before you go back to your home and pack your bags, I will recommend you all to stop by the local farmers market, the St. Paul Farmers Market. I like to go to the Minneapolis one. In Brooklyn Center, I go to the one in my hometown every Thursday. And most likely you'll see a Hmong farmer in almost every other booth. And so please go out and support them, give them your business, just as much you have supported your farmers back home. And so with that, members, this is a great bill. I'm proud to have done this work with you, all of you, including Greater Minnesota, and please vote green.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Acomb.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I really appreciate the conversation tonight and all of the discussion. Appreciate the concerns that were brought up. And one thing I do want to touch on is there was some concern about geothermal, and I just want to say that the emphasis in our bill this year on geothermal is because buildings in Minnesota produce 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and so geothermal can be an incredibly effective tool to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. And One of the provisions, I think it was talked about how expensive it can be to utilize geothermal in like a single-family residential home, and that's actually true. And so in our bill, the applications are for larger buildings or a networked system that will link individual buildings together. It can be an incredibly efficient way to both heat and cool, and as well as decarbonize. I think that, you know, as I think of over some of the comments that were made tonight, I do want to point out that Representative, oh shoot, never mind, we're going to skip that one. Sorry about that. Representative Schultz brought up the possibility of opportunities around transmission and investments around interconnection, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think that there's some opportunities to look into that going forward, and I look forward to doing that in future sessions. So thank you for that thought, and we can look at it next year. And what I will say is that I really appreciate many of the concerns that were raised about how expensive some of these investments might be, but I also want people to recognize the importance of not doing anything and how expensive that can be. And I think as we see the large storms and the impacts that they have on disasters and the response, we're seeing how expensive it is playing out on the landscape in Minnesota year after year. We're seeing the impacts of our changing climate every year. And so the whole notion of addressing climate change is incredibly important. As I look at the bill, I'm proud of all of the work that went into it and all of the provisions that we put together that are addressing all of the issues. So thank you all for all of your help on this bill. It's a good bill. Vote for it.
Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move to lay Senate File 4942 on
Madam
the table.
Speaker, I request a roll
Representative
call.
Long moves to lay Senate File 4942 on the table. All those in favor, please say
Madam
aye.
Speaker, I request a roll call.
Madam Speaker,
I request a roll call. Madam Speaker, I request a roll call. Division. Madam Speaker, division.
Conference Committee
Madam
reports
Speaker,
on House
division.
files.
Madam
The
Speaker,
clerk will report the bill.
division.
Conference
Madam
report
Speaker,
on House Bill number
division.
5247, an act relating to taxation. Report is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hoffman, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 5247, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute. The report is signed by 5 of the 5 members on the part of the House and 4 of the 5 members on the part of the Senate. Gomez moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 5247 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a bill to finance state government and includes the following Conference Committee reports and bills. House File 5242 relating to transportation, housing, and labor. House File 4247, scope of practice. House File 4024, higher education. House File 2609, straw purchase binary trigger ban. Senate File 4942, agriculture energy. Senate File 5335, DHS. Senate File 4699, HHS. Paid family leave. House File 5363, fourth engrossment. And the tax bill. The full text of the CCRs are posted online. Each of these bills went through the regular committee process and conference process with extensive vetting. We've been working in public for weeks on the contents of this bill.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
Madam Speaker, the minority has a right to be heard under our rules, but the majority also has a right to govern. This week we saw in this chamber an 8-hour filibuster on a bipartisan bill to limit junk fees. We saw an 8-hour debate on a technical fix paid leave bill that stretched longer than the debate creating the program. We spent 14 hours going through the night on Equal Rights Amendment. We saw a 5-hour debate on Uber Lyft that included extraneous amendments on the Pollution Control Agency and vaccines. Giving this, the majority has to use the tools it has to get its work done, and therefore I move the previous question.
Representative Long has moved the previous question. Do I see 15 hands for the previous question? Seeing 15 hands, the motion to the previous question.
presiding officer. I request a new presiding officer. Madam Speaker, Section 126,
the clerk will call
I
the
request
name
a
of
new
the member
presiding
voting
officer that
remotely.
recognizes the voice of the minority.
Carol.
Speaker, parliamentary inquiry. Madam
Carol,
Madam
aye.
Speaker, parliamentary inquiry. Nobody looking
We
at
have
Madam
election
Speaker.
certificates. You are violating the Constitution of the state of Minnesota.
Madam Speaker,
This is an illegal act.
Nobody looking at this Speaker. Madam Speaker, parliamentary inquiry. We request a copy of this bill of 1,430 pages, not available on the website, not available in this chamber. This is a horrible way to govern and do this for the state of Minnesota.
Republican leaders
Madam Speaker,
decided to
point of
put
order, motion to
critical
reconsider.
legislation into one garbage bill. The media nicknamed the bill Omnibus Prime because it was like a cartoon character monster, weighing in at more than 990
Madam Speaker, I
pages.
move that
and
Senate
demanded
file
Madam Speaker, motion to reconsider. The Senate was in recess for 18 hours yesterday, and then they're trying to blame this on us.
To read the bill before they were called upon to vote for or against it. That was a 990-page bill.
Madam Speaker, I move to recess.
We move to take the bill off the table that we were just considering, the Ag Climate Bill. All those in favor, please
Madam
say
Speaker, I
aye.
made a-
Looking at this legislative
Those opposed,
session,
please say
Democrat
no.
or Republican? Division. Madam Speaker, 6 years ago this month. Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker.
I move that we adjourn, sign,
Conference Committee
die.
Report on House Senate File number 4942.
Madam Speaker,
Motion to sign and die.
And related to state government operations and finance.
motion. Madam Speaker,
Welcome
I
to
move
socialism.
that we adjourn, sine die. Non-debatable motion.
Representative
Will you
Long.
not recognize
Madam Speaker, I
the
move the
voice
previous
of the
question on Senate
minority?
File 4942.
Move the previous question. Are there
voice of the
15
minority?
hands? Seeing 15 hands, the motion for the previous question has been properly
Nobody.
seconded. All
The
those
bill is
in
not
favor
even
of moving the
available.
previous question say
Madam
aye.
Speaker,
Those opposed say no.
No.
The motion prevails, and the previous
the
question
division.
is so ordered. The clerk will take the roll on the bill.
Madam Speaker.
On a bill nobody has read.
Nobody's read the bill.
On a bill.
Communism.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. What democracy looks like. This is what democracy
Madam
looks
Speaker.
like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Will the clerk please call the name of the member voting remotely?
It is
Clardy.
for the public to know it is 11:14.
Madam Speaker, there was a motion to reconsider. There was a motion to sign and die.
to
Clerk
do
will close
business,
the roll.
and the majority party is shutting us out. 45 minutes left, and we are completely being shut down.
There being 70 ayes and 11 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the conference
Madam
and its
Speaker, I
title
move that we
agreed to.
reconsider, and I request a roll call.
Message from the Senate.
Madam Speaker, I move that we request
Roll call.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the Senate has concurred and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File number 5335, an act relating to human
Madam
services.
Speaker, point of
Message
order.
is signed by Thomas Potter,
Point of order,
Secretary
Madam
of the
Speaker.
Senate.
I demand you present
Members on the part of the House. Senate File 5335 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference.
All those in favor of adoption, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no.
This is criminal.
The motion prevails. The clerk will take the roll on the bill.
Madam Speaker.
Communism.
clerk will take the roll.
Madam Speaker, in this chamber, there are no equal rights.
You haven't reset it yet.
Madam Speaker, I move that we adjourn sine die. That is not debatable. I request a roll call, and I request that I would be recognized in this chamber.
Senate File 5335.
Madam Speaker, you are silencing the voice of the minority. There are no equal rights in this chamber, in this state, with a full Democrat trifecta. The bill right now, 1,430 pages, not available in the state of Minnesota, either in a print copy in this chamber or online.
The clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I demand that you listen to our leader.
One more time.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Carol, aye.
A little bit louder.
Nobody looking at this legislative session,
Madam Speaker.
Democrat or Republican, should ever.
Madam Speaker.
We certainly would not.
Aye.
Melissa Hortman on
Carol
garbage
votes
bills
aye.
6 years ago this month.
Madam Speaker, I
Hussein
move
votes
that
aye.
we
The
adjourn
clerk will
sine die.
close
It
the
is not
roll.
debatable. Roll call.
Hussein votes aye. The clerk will close the roll.
Hussein?
There being
Last day
68
of
ayes
speakership.
and 0
Madam
nays,
Speaker.
the bill is repassed as amended by conference
Madam
and
Speaker,
entitled agreed
I
to.
move that we adjourn sine die.
Representative Long.
I request a roll call, and that is not a debatable motion. If there are equal rights in the state of Minnesota, there would be equal rights in this chamber tonight.
Representative Long. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the Speaker.
Representative Long moves a
Madam
recess to the call of
Speaker.
the chair. All those in favor, please say
Madam
aye.
Speaker, I move
Those
that we
opposed,
adjourn
please say
sine
no.
die. That is
The
not a
motion